Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real People, Real Health. This afternoon, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tony and Priscilla to the studio. They are coming in live from Cancun, Mexico, where Dr. Tony is actually the founder of Hope for Cancer. And so I'd like to welcome you to the studio and welcome to the show. It's nice to see the two of you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to be here.
We had intended to go on through a link that did not work through Zoom, so I'm going to just push it out on a few pages, and I will also share it. I guess Marcy found it. I'm going to push it out through Hope for Cancer as well. If you all can just take a moment here just to bear with us while we do some technical studio work. There it is. Okay. And one more spot I'm gonna push it out to while we're just taking care of some business here. Well, definitely this is not like CBS, NBC. This is Facebook Live. And for anyone like myself that uses Facebook Live to do studio shows, it doesn't always go as we intend or planned it to go, but we show up and we adjust to the technical difficulties and challenges, including Wi-Fi. Originally, we had this show set up to be coming out of your office, and the signal wasn't strong enough, so you guys had to adapt and reset. But in any event, welcome to the studio. I wanted to just take a moment to just share with those that are jumping on live with us as they catch up, because they were waiting for us to come in on the other link. I learned about you guys just about a week ago when I met Kate Malvinen, who is a Facebook friend of mine. And she had been posting about her journey, her healing journey of stage 4 cancer that had metastasized to many other parts of her body other than her lungs. And through Kate, who ended up coming on my show about 3 or 4 days ago, I learned about Hope for Cancer and you, Dr. Tony. And the more I learned and the more I dug in and the more research I did on my own to learn about the work that you are doing and your background, the more I was so impressed and so grateful to know that there are doctors like yourself that have decided to, let's say, shift into a different strategy of facing the challenge of disease, specifically cancer in this regard. And so I'd like to invite you, Dr. Tony, to maybe start to share how you actually got into why Hope for Cancer, what was your background, a little bit about where you grew up, and if you could start there, we'll just let it flow.
Okay, thank you, Jay. And we are here in beautiful Cancun, Mexico, actually in one of the treatment rooms here. And as you see, I'm having an IV drip at the moment. So as a physician, as a healer, we have to make sure that what we're giving our patients is something that we would receive ourselves. And in the oncology world, oncologists will not give themselves what they give their patients because it's highly toxic, destroys your immune system, you lose your hair and so forth. So all the therapies here at Hope for Cancer are non-toxic in nature. And what the audience is listening to and will listen to today is so important because decreasing the incidence of cancer is so very important. We know that 1 in every 2 men in the US will have cancer sometime in their lifetime, and 1 of every 3 females will have. So my story started after medical school when my father in medical training and so forth in Mexico, my father was diagnosed with stage 3B prostate cancer in Houston, Texas. And what do you do in Houston if you have cancer? You go to the reputable hospital there. And he had not given me the information. He didn't want to tell me this and worried me. And so he received 1 dosage of hormone therapy to block his testosterone. he felt miserable, and that's when he called me and said, I can't do this anymore. Explain to me the situation. And at that time, the best I could do was to support him, love him, and tell him, let me take care of you. And so that started my journey in learning beyond what medical school teaches you, and medical training and internship and so forth. So I began to travel the world. I've been to over 70 countries now, and I've worked in many places, many hospitals, including China, Israel, Asia, of course, and Europe and South America. So it was, as most physicians who stepped outside of the conventional world, we have a story, right, of what drove us to do what we do. And for me, it was my dad. And my dad was in his early 60s, and he passed away when he was 83 from unrelated causes. So that was 20 plus years later after being diagnosed with an advanced prostate cancer. And all that was done non-toxically and naturally. Some of the therapies that we did back then, of course, they've progressed, and we aren't doing some of them anymore. Or the ones that we're doing are just not enough now. In those years, in the early 1990s, it was coffee enemas, nutrition, and maybe B17. And maybe many patients did well. Now cancer is more aggressive. Treatments are more toxic. People are more toxic. We're all more toxic now because of the environment, the food, Wi-Fi, smart meters, and all this. So it was really a wake-up call when it hit home. It hit with my dad, the person that I admire, in a way I idolized growing up, right? As he moved his family from Colombia. I was born in Colombia, Jay, and grew up in New Jersey. And God brought me to Mexico to go to medical school in Mexico. That wasn't in my plans. I was going to go study medicine in England. But God had another route for me, brought me to Mexico. And here we are almost 30 years later with 2 treatment facilities of hope for cancer. The Tijuana one opened in the year 2000, and now where we are now in Cancun in 2015.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So I think it's safe to say you saved your dad's life.
Absolutely.
And I can only imagine how it must have felt for your dad to know that his son actually had gone to medical school and had learned about the disease of cancer. And in fact, you were able to prolong his life, and he didn't pass from cancer. How did it feel for you to play that role for your own dad?
Well, you could only imagine not being in my shoes, but what I felt was, wow, if I did it with the passion, the enthusiasm, the urgency for my dad, this is how I'm going to do it with all my patients from now on, right? And that's what we did. And we're blessed here to have one of our current patients, Priscilla, who's from Minneapolis in the US. And she's been here almost 3 weeks. Almost 3 weeks. And I invited her maybe to share a little bit of what she feels when she walks into Hope for Cancer, which is, well, she'll tell you better, but our core values at Hope for Cancer are faith, love, hope, and generosity. And just knowing that, and the doctors, the staff, the nurses bringing this forth, that's a big part of the healing. And now the patients, Jay, and viewers are living to live. They're not living to die. They don't have in their mind that prognosis that the doctor told them back home, you have 6 months to live, or, at best you could live 2-3 years. So this is the first thing that has to change. And I think you've experienced that, haven't you, Priscilla?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I can't say enough about the experience. My own background, Jay, when I was 16, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. And this was in the 1970s. And she started chemo and radiation. My sister started reading Adele Davis books about vitamin supplementation, got her on vitamins, and she was rallying. She was doing great. Her doctors commented how well she was doing. And she said, my daughter's giving me vitamins. And they said, you've got to stop that. That's interfering with your treatment. She stopped, and 2 weeks later, she passed. And then my father, who was diagnosed with cancer, he had a 4th grade education. He was an Italian immigrant. He didn't understand his doctor. They were giving him about 9 months to live. And he thought they said he was cured. So he misunderstood, and he lived another 20 years. So the power of our mental perspective is enormous. And that's something that's really, really supported in this program. It's wonderful. And I can't say enough about the integrity of the program, the respect given to patients, the attentiveness. Our doctors are available to us the entire day. The facility itself is clean, beautiful, new, modern. The nursing staff is fabulous. The chef is outstanding. He cooks all of our meals, brings them to us when we're ready in between treatments. I can't say enough about the program. It's been a wonderful experience.
So although you're in there for specific treatment for your disease, let me rephrase that, if I may, for the disease that you were diagnosed with, because I want to take that statement back. It's not your disease. You don't own it. So my apology for referring to it that way. But the disease that you were diagnosed with, you're not just there. The treatment is not just about focusing on one aspect of, let's say, chemo or radiation of any sort, but it's a multi-pronged approach. And from my understanding is you refer to it as the 7 key principles of how you fundamentally approach cancer. And would you be willing to share a little bit about that? Either one of you.
Yes, thank you for that, Jay. And I'll mention my book at this point because I think it's appropriate. This is my upcoming book that will be released in April, the end of April of 2019. So in a few weeks. It's called Hope for Cancer, the 7 principles to remove fear and empower your healing journey. And with respect to your question, if we look on page 55 of this book, and it talks about the 10 hallmarks of cancer. This work started in the early 2000s, where scientists and researchers started looking at what are the characteristics, what are the features of cancer, not specifically stomach cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, but what do cancers have in common? Because conventional medicine is attacking the cancer, the tumor. But what led to that formation? What are the features? What are the hallmarks, characteristics that enable this tumor, this lump, this lymph node to form? And now we know, even with further research in 2012, we know these characteristics of cancer. One of them is the ability of cancer cells to shield themselves or hide themselves from the immune system. So we could have a competent immune system according to blood tests, but that immune system is not seeing the cancer cells and it's bypassing them. So that's one feature of cancer. The ability of cancer cells to form the so-called cancer stem cells that are resistant to chemo, resistant to radiation. And by the way, this is not Dr. Tony saying that, this is published peer-reviewed information, that cancer stem cells are resistant to chemo and radiation. And so that's another feature of cancer, how cancer is able to leave the primary organ, the breast, the colon, the stomach, the prostate. And remember, everyone, that the primary tumor doesn't take people's life, with few exceptions. It does, like primary brain tumors. But a breast cancer doesn't kill anyone. What kills the patients are that breast cancer going to the brain, going to the liver, going to the lungs, going to the bone, those vital organs. And so this is what we must attend to, is that those cells leaving the primary tumor, right?
So what you're saying, Dr. Tony, also is that it's not a local disease, it's a systemic disease. We need to treat the entire terrain,
Yes.
in order to be cured, not
It's
just
about-
remove it.
It's about that terrain, right? Because, you know, we cut out the cancer, and you've heard this many times, Jay, patients or people saying that the doctor said, we got it all. So they got what they could see. They removed what they could see, that primary tumor. But as you said, Priscilla, cancer is a systemic disease. And unless we work on that terrain and look at these characteristics or feature of cancer, we know that the high rate of recurrence and the mortality of cancer is significantly related to the metastatic activity.
Well, that, if I may paraphrase you, Dr. Tony, typically in traditional care, they attack the spot, they attack the organ, the part of the body that has the cancer. What I learned about what you and your team do at Hope for Cancer is that you're not just focusing on that isolated spot or organ. You are treating the whole body as a whole, not just the physical body, but there's also the mental body as well, the mental organ, our thinking, our mind, our brain.
Yes.
And so my understanding is you have a staff combined over 200 people, if I'm correct, roughly, and they include therapists of some sort, whether they be psychologists or social workers. I believe you have maybe a psychologist on staff, but you actually combine the emotional part of the healing process as well. Is that accurate?
Very accurate. And I like the phrase that we don't treat the cancer in the patient, we treat the patient with the cancer. That's very profound because, as you just said, Jay, we're not treating that tumor. We're treating the patient that has that tumor. And within the 7 key principles, that is what my book is about, the 7 key principles to cancer therapy, we are talking, one of them, and possibly the most important one, is the emotional spiritual aspect of cancer. And yes, we have therapists that are, by the way, they're not only therapists, they're medical doctors in both of our clinics, the Tijuana clinic and the Cancun clinic, that are trained and experienced to work on helping the patient bring to conscious awareness those traumas, those conflicts, the abuse as a child, the overbearing father, the bullies in school, the divorces, you know, the financial losses, the loss of a job, all these sudden acute traumas that later in life, if not released and let go of, can be the triggers to start that tumor development. Did you have any experience with that work here, Priscilla?
I've started to. I still have another session with
Okay.
Dr. Leslie, and she's wonderful. I can't say enough about her. They give you back your power here. Most conventional cancer programs take it from you. You become the patient and you're told, directed what to do. Here, you're very much in the driver's seat, and they provide all of these wonderful therapies. But if you have input, it's acknowledged and respected. So that really gives the power back to the individual, because we know that the people who heal the best are those who take action and have some authority in their own healing.
Yeah, that's so important, Jay, because as you were saying, Priscilla, you know, the empowering the patient on that healing journey, and it is a journey because they're only here 3 weeks. Some patients are here a little longer, but what happens when they leave the clinic? What happens at home when they remove themselves from toxic relationships, for example, you know, from toxins at home, when they are able to be compliant and do the therapies at home. This is very important because here it's easy, Jay, you know, the nurses, the doctors, the therapists, the staff is helping you do the therapies, empowering you. But once you get home, it's vitally important to be empowered. Right.
And I see our role too, Jay, as bringing this forward, because the conventional thinking is just do it the conventional way, get rid of it. That's a very popular mindset. And that's what we're up against when we go home and meet with others. And it's kind of our responsibility to inform them and let them know that It's about healing the immune system. It's about real immunity. It's not about just cutting something out or doing the quick fix.
And as you were asking, Jay, about the emotional and the spiritual, and how is that even related to what Priscilla just said about the immune system? If we have toxic negative thoughts and emotion, I once said that a negative thought can kill you faster than a bad germ. A negative thought can kill you faster than a bad germ. And so when we have these negative thoughts, these traumas, our immune system is going to be suppressed. So it doesn't matter if we're doing all this vitamin C, curcumin, and different therapies to increase the status of the immune system. If we have these negative thoughts and traumas and not be working out of gratitude, then the results will not be the same. So yes, Jay, the emotional spiritual is of utmost importance.
You know, one question that comes to my mind is that when I hit my rock bottom in my own physical well-being, it wasn't just the physical, there was the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual. I was at my rock bottom. And for me, one of the challenges has been my healing journey has been an ongoing, meaning that I knew I had to work on the emotional and the mental in order to allow my body to the physical healing to take place. That's been an ongoing, let's say, process of over 41 months now. When a patient like Priscilla comes in and they're there for 21 days, typically, some extended or come back for a second time. As Kate explained in her story, how do you encourage them to continue the emotional and the mental part of the healing journey when they leave your facility where they have received some guidance in that aspect?
Wow, this is such, and I know many people when they're asked a question, they say, that's a great question, but this truly is a great question because, you know, we are trying to rid ourselves and release and let go of traumas that could have started even before we were born. And even if we look historically at biblical references and others, we could inherit up to 3 generations of stuff, you know, of trauma. And we surely have a backpack of stuff that we need to be releasing. So at the clinic, at our treatment centers, both in Tijuana and Cancun, our therapists, our doctors work with this, and they give the patients like Priscilla homework. They give them tools, they give them ways to let go and release these traumas and negative thoughts. And as they go, and by the way, we also have a questionnaire, that's a 5-6 page questionnaire where the patient builds their timeline. What happened, you know, when I moved away from my parents and I was free from food, money, and shelter. I was responsible for my own well-being. You know, when was I married? So you start doing a timeline. And this is something, Priscilla, that we need to continue. I've been working on my timeline. You said 41 months, Jay. I've been working on my timeline and my trauma for probably 5 years, right? And I don't even have cancer, thank goodness, but this is for all of us, right? And yes. So as the patient goes home, we have a home program support team that'll be calling them on a periodic basis, and that's the medical part. And then for the emotional spiritual part, we have what we call the BEST program, behavioral, emotional, and spiritual therapy. And in this program, we have a couple therapists that included in your program, Priscilla. Once you go home, you will be called, I believe it's 3 times, to continue this work. And then after the 3rd time, if more work needs to be done, then that could be arranged as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Each patient comes in with a different diagnosis. And is it safe to say that the treatment for each patient is customized? Is it customized to their specific needs, or?
Yes, it is safe to say that. However, that being said, we know the characteristics, we know the hallmarks of cancer that I've only mentioned 2 or 3, including the ability of cancer cells to form their own blood supply. So in all of our patients, we have what we call the foundational therapies. This lies the foundation, if you will, the support like IV vitamin C, detoxification with coffee enemas, saunas, hyperbaric oxygen, ozone to improve oxygenation. And that's covering our 7 key principles. And then in addition to that, then that's where we customize it based on the diagnosis. And, whether they get certain IVs versus other IVs, whether we have different types of immunotherapies that can vary. But one thing in cancer is that in the world of cancer, I believe, Jay and viewers, that doctors, the medical system tries to complicate it too much, right? We don't have to complicate it too much. We need to focus on those 7 key principles that are outlined very well in the literature and in my book, and then customize individualities, specifically, I think the nutrition, right? Because we are all biochemically unique, and maybe for you, broccoli is good, but for me, when I eat broccoli, I might get bloated, distended, and a little lethargic. So, those things our medical staff and our nurses view and adjust as necessary.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Doc. I appreciate that. Priscilla, could you give me an example of what a atypical day looks like for you while you're in a treatment center?
Sure. So patients are picked up at the hotel, and we come in and we have a group prayer. There's some music. There's a few moments of prayer just to kind of align ourselves and center ourselves for the day. Then we go into the IV room. Some people start an IV because we're having vitamin C or other things. Some go straight for a massage. So each day we have a massage, for lymph drainage or other type of massage. We might do a coffee enema. We might do ultraviolet light on the tumor site, depending on what type of cancer we have. Then we might do the hyperbaric chamber. We're given breakfast in the morning that's served to us. And then in between therapies, we're given lunch. Hyperbaric chamber, there's sauna or hyperthermia. There's the coffee enema. There's PEMF, which is the pulsed electromagnetic frequency that we're given to the tumor site. What else? Did I miss anything?
Ozone therapy.
Ozone therapy, definitely. There's a great therapy where our blood is recirculated with ozone in it. And that happens a couple times a week. We see the therapist a few times a week. We see the nutritionist. We have a hair follicle sample and taken, and we see the nutritionist individually who creates a unique food plan for us based on blood work plus the hair analysis. Wow. So that's a great appointment.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's that happens from Monday to Saturday here in the Cancun clinic, 6 days a week, and then they get to go out and enjoy the beauty of Cancun. In Tijuana, it's not so beautiful, but it's a great atmosphere. So in both clinics, the day is started, as Priscilla said, with prayer, with coming together. That's so powerful, Jay, when the patients come together in the morning and they have those prayers, they have words of encouragement for each other. We have either doctors or other staff that play the guitar.
Right.
And so, there's music, therapy, and it's just a very healing, loving atmosphere. And by the way, interesting, this IV that's being started is for me, not for the patient, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you were getting.
She's done with her therapies for the day.
What kind of IV are you getting, Doc? What are you getting set up for yourself right now?
The first, this is my second IV for today. The first IV is called olefinolia. And this is what's called a polyphenol. It's very safe, non-toxic. It comes from plants, and it's basically a very powerful antioxidant. It stabilizes the cell membrane. It just prevents cancer cells from growing and doing anything, because we're all forming cancer cells every day, right? So olefinolia is a good baseline therapy that I try to do as often as possible. And this is a nutritional IV with certain vitamins and minerals. I travel a lot, Jay, and don't sleep as much as I should. a lot of research and work, and so we need to take care of ourselves, right? So that we,
Beautiful. And a proactive, you're
yeah,
taking, that's called self-care, Doc.
that's right.
You're doing your own self-care in a way that makes sense for you. And
Exactly. Yes.
let's talk a little bit about nutrition.
Mhm.
A lot of people, there's a lot of different opinions on how to treat cancer from a nutritional standpoint. Keto diet is got a lot of momentum in the U.S. There's a lot of people that believe that keto is actually good for cancer, that it'll help rid the body of it. I'm interested to learn more about, well, your perspective on the keto diet, if you may, if you're comfortable with that. And then secondly, what is your nutrition plan that, let's say, global, within your two facilities that you offer to your patients?
Okay, I'll try to do it in a summary form because this is a good group of questions, right? First of all, I'd like to say that no one is the same. We're all biologically individuals, as we know. And so in what I will share with you is my clinical experience of almost 30 years, not only at Hope for Cancer Treatment Centers, but around the world, and observations on patients. Because we don't have to believe everything that is published. We have to take that with a grain of salt sometimes. So we are in the lion's den, if you will. We are here seeing patients every day, as opposed to someone who's writing about a diet or writing about something, and they're talking about it from a theoretical perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's fine, but we need to see how it applies clinically. So in this book, Hope for Cancer, which I mentioned a few times, I coined a term called the Garden Food Plan, the Garden Food Plan. And this is the basic foundation of my personal understanding, clinical experience on nutrition. And I typically don't like to say the word diet, because when we say diet, the connotation is, oh, a diet, I have to follow this. It's going to be horrible. It's not going to taste well and so forth. So a good nutrition plan. And the Garden Food Plan is to go back to the garden. Go back to the garden. If we believe that God is all knowing, all loving, and all powerful, what he put in the garden is good for us. Not only when we are healthy, but also if someone has cancer. So wait, there's an apple, there's a banana, there's a pineapple in the garden, but then someone has cancer and now this is supposed to be bad for them? I just don't get that from a spiritual perspective. And I'm not talking religion, right? I'm talking from a spiritual perspective. And so I had this verified as much as possible from a patient of ours also that is from Israel, who studied at the Jerusalem University, and she's a Bible scholar and teaches it in the Jewish and also in the Christian perspective. And she told me, Dr. Tony, it doesn't make, let's call it God sense or logic, that God will put something in the garden that now the banana or the orange or the apple you shouldn't eat because sugar feeds cancer, right? So my thought on this is that certain sugars feed cancer, and those are the sugars that spin to the right. So for instance, someone who has a PET scan, they have the contrast medium, and that's a right spin sugar, Jay, right? So the cancer cells take it up and it lights up the PET scan. And so what we know is that natural sugars in unadulterated foods, non-processed, non-GMO, no insecticide, none of that, are spinning to the left. And those are the only sugar molecules that healthy cells would obtain. Cancer cells cannot absorb those types of sugar. And that being said, this is not 100% scientifically proven, but it is what I recommend to our patients and what we have had good results with. So basically, it's whole plant nutrition. It's eating from the garden. It's you can include some eggs and some non-bottom dwelling fish, because some patients require more proteins. Maybe they're in cachexia, which is muscle wasting. Maybe they have had, toxic effects from the chemo and they need more nutrition. So simply put, Jay, we follow a garden food plan as for our nutrition. And then we see where we have to make adjustments. We look at gut health because our body assimilates what it needs. So for example, if I offer you, Jay, a basket of M&Ms and a basket of apples, well, not you, Jay, but other people, they will finish the basket of M&Ms because it doesn't give you a nutritional balance and you're just eating that processed sugar. But the basket of apples, maybe you'll eat 2 apples. You seem like a strong guy. Maybe you'll eat 3 apples, but after that, you're satisfied. Your body says, I have the nutrition. I've absorbed all the nutrients from those apples. Now give me something else. Give me, a grapefruit or another food source, right? And so when we're eating natural, healthy garden food based nutrition, it gives us a sense of satisfaction. We get the nutrients that we need, and we're not overeating. So this is, this is a long topic, and just a little brief with respect to the keto diet. I think I'm still in that gray area with respect to the keto diet. I think maybe 5 years from now, it'll phase out and it'll be something else. I think the keto diet, there's some good studies on it, but I'd rather not introduce, if someone wants to do a plant-based keto, I'm more in favor of that than having them eating meats and pork and chicken and all that, because those are foods that are tough to digest. And 35% of the energy that our body spends in a day is in the digestive process. And so let's decrease those foods that are tough to break down, assimilate, and digest, and gives the body more energy. So none of our patients are recommended to have meats and pork, especially not in the initial 3 months.
Right. And Jay, the nutritionist, actually individualized a plan for me and talked about plant-based keto, leaning towards that. He was very informed about the recent literature and was willing to adapt something for me. Mm-hmm. So, they're open to individualizing programs for people, which is great. But here at the center, the chef has all organic fruits and vegetables, juices every day, and sends us home at night with a quart of juice for us to have at night. And then we bring the empty bottle back for him to fill the next day.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. The nutrition is so huge. One thing that I don't comprehend so well is how limited, at least in the schools in the United States, nutrition is not a huge emphasis in medical school, is my understanding. Yet nutrition is the fuel that feeds the body.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jay. And it's not only in the US, it's everywhere in the world. I had an hour of nutrition in medical school. They told me, don't give salt to the patient that has high blood pressure. Watch the sugar, the diabetics, and give fiber to those that are constipated. And basically that was the end of it, right?
Well, that was, to be fair, that was over 30 years ago.
That's true.
Has it changed? I'm going to ask you because I don't know. I haven't talked to a recent graduate from medical school, but I don't know if it's changed or not. But that's the same story I've always heard of what you just shared.
Talk to any oncologist, because most of the patients here who have asked their oncologist, "What should I eat?" They're told it doesn't really matter. So.
Yeah, eat whatever you want. Yeah. And if you look at the American Cancer Society website, and you look on there on nutrition, they say nutrition is to enable you to withstand the treatments better. So the American Cancer Society sees nutrition as something to help you take more chemo and more radiation. So have more calories, have more calories to withstand these therapies, not as nutrition, as a therapy in itself, as you're saying, Jay?
Well, I'm gonna back up that statement you just shared, because a very dear friend of mine, unfortunately, I had him on one of my other shows, Real Men, Real Talk Raw. He was, I believe he went vegan for a while, either vegetarian or vegan, one or the other. And he was losing a lot of weight. Now he had weight to lose, but while he was battling prostate cancer, his doctor didn't agree with him being on that type of nutrition, because he said exactly what you said. And I heard this from my friend. He said he was told, you have to eat protein. You can't just be eating fruit and vegetables, because you need to keep some weight on for when you need the third or fourth round of chemo.
Mm-hmm.
Because without it, you're not going to have enough weight to withstand. Well, unfortunately, he didn't make it. He passed, and in November on Thanksgiving Eve. I just going to leave it at that. So what you said, Doc, is a close friend of mine was just told that in the last 2 years. Go keto, get the protein in you. It didn't quite work out so well. Right. I'd like to shift gears in this moment and ask you, you touched on spirituality. Well, you touched on prayer at the beginning of the morning and music therapy. Is your program at the treatment center, is it a religious-based program or is it a spiritually based program?
Well, if you look at one of our current patients that are at the clinic right now, we have Muslims, we have Christians. Sometimes we've had them from every religious denomination. So as a human being and as a teacher, as a facilitator, one of the things that we support in cancer is it's respect, it's love for our neighbors, for our fellow human beings. So this is not about religion. This is about having the patient communicate with that higher being, right? I am a Christian, and so if they get to meet Jesus and have experience with Jesus, awesome. However, we respect that, and as long as they're spiritual, emotional, and physical bodies, that holistic, that whole person is as balanced as possible, then their likelihood of getting healed is so much better. You know, Jay, that in former times in ancient Egypt and Greece, when someone went to a health facility, a medical facility, the first person they saw was a spiritual counselor, whether that was the monk, the rabbi, the priest, the minister, independently of the religion, right? But it was a spiritual aspect. And then they saw the emotional or psychological advisor, and then us, the medical doctors. We were at the back by the bathroom. That's the importance that they gave to health and healing. You know, the physical was the last thing, was the spiritual, the emotional, and then us. So it's so beautiful when you see patients of different faith, different denominations come together in the morning, right, Priscilla? Yeah. And pray and look at that spiritual life as being so important in healing. Now, recently, they have found that our brain cells and probably cells in the rest of the body are communicating with light, not just chemicals, molecules, but there's photons of light being communicated in the process of information transfer from cell to cell. And maybe if we look at images of ancient times, when you see like that light halo, you see that in the Hindu religion, in the Buddhist, and in the Christian, you know, it's about that light. It's about that connection with the higher self, with the higher being, that ultimately is a big part of the healing.
It's almost as if illness is a sacred calling to transform. You know,
yeah, to wake. I call it the awakening.
Yes,
exactly.
You know, I was sleeping for 54 years of my life until I had my awakening. You know, I went from the darkness to the lightness. It took a lot of work, a lot of commitment, But that's what healing's about. It's learning how to be committed to your own well-being and taking back your life at
And
all
Jay,
at all
that's
expense.
what Hope for Cancer is committed to. That's the big difference.
And you know what? Cancer cannot exist in the light. Cancer can only be in the dark, in the darkness. So once we have that light shining in all aspects of our being, cancer doesn't like it.
Next time the RN comes to give you your drip, could you ask her to give me a virtual drip? I started on a water fast yesterday. Today's my day 2. I'm doing a combination water juicing fast.
This is Lupita. He wants an IV, Lupita.
Can you set me up with a virtual IV right now? I want what the doc's got. I want what you got, Dr. Tony.
Well, you're always welcome, as you know. I'm here to Hope for Cancer. The doors are open, and we'll be happy to treat you to some wonderful juices.
Which leads me to another question. Do you only treat cancer patients, or have you expanded into, let's say, for example, autoimmune, which is right now at an epidemic proportion with no sign of cures for disease in a near distance? So I was curious, is it strictly cancer, or do your treatments work for other types of diseases?
I would say 99% of our patients are cancer patients. So some do come that are non-cancer, very small percentage. The thing to understand here is that 6 of the 7 key principles that I outline in my book, and by the way, they can be found on the website, www.hope4cancer.com. So for other viewers to please look at these 7 key principles, because they truly form the foundation of health and recovery and healing. But 6 of them, Jay, apply to all of us. And these patients with autoimmune or other chronic diseases besides cancer, if they apply those six key principles, then their prognosis, their outcome is much better. So treating chronic diseases and autoimmune diseases is basically, cancer is an inflammatory disease. Cancer in some way is it is an immune dysfunction. So, now the surgeon for the pinky is different than the surgeon for the thumb, and it's becoming too specialized, and we're losing the essence of health and well-being in medicine. And so the answer to your question is we can and have treated and do treat patients with non-cancer, but for some reason, we focus more on the oncology, on the cancer patient.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to a podcast that you did with Dr. Mercola earlier this month. I believe your wife forwarded me the podcast link, and so I listened to it. I'd like to invite you, Doc, if you may share some of the statistics that are out there today, as far as you had some independent studies done, research done on statistics of patients that have come through Hope for Cancer versus patients that have gone through traditional care. I'm just opening it up to you to share what information you can as a way to share and show people that there is hope, yes, that there is more than one way to go after the disease, and that you have had some significant success. I replayed that. I rewound like 4 times because I kept thinking I must be hearing it wrong, because those numbers were staggering.
Well, guess what, Jay? I thought the same thing when our third-party independent group gave us the numbers, because we're here treating patients all the time, and we've been doing this at Hope for Cancer since 2000, almost 19 years. And so oftentimes we don't know these numbers precisely, but when the third party analyzed 365 charts, which they chose randomly from patients here in Cancun, the first thing that we found out was 92% of these 365 patients are in stage 4. Imagine that. They've already failed conventional therapy, or at the time that they were diagnosed, they were in stage 4 and were not candidates for chemo, surgery, or radiation. And even sometimes the doctors just told them go to hospice, right? So 92% of our patients were in that stage. And so they looked at, and this is a retrospective study, meaning the patients are already here and we're looking how they're doing a year later, 2 years later, and now we're in the third year of this study. And for the first year, the 1 year survival was upwards of 78%. The second year, it was still in the 77% area, 77.6 or so percent, 2 year survival. And then now in the third year, we will see. And what they statistically calculated, Jay, was that in 5 years, we would still be above 70%. And so I pray that this is true once we get to 5 years. However, if we compare even the first year survival and the second year survival statistics to the National Cancer Institute SEER data, surveillance, epidemiology, and end stage result data. This is the gold standard of data. If you look at that data, it was in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% 1 and 2 year survivals. And our patients are stage 4. The NCI data is typically stage 3, not stage 4. So as you said, I had to look twice also, Jay, at this information. And you know, numbers are important, statistics are good. However, when I'm traveling and I run into someone at an airport and they say, Dr. Tony, remember me? You know, I was at clinic 10 years ago. Or I come back to the Cancun clinic or the Tijuana clinic and I see a patient that came 2 years ago with lung cancer. You interviewed Kate, you know, situations like this, and we're seeing them more and more and more often every day. So this is a good time for people around the world that see your show, Jay, to know that there is hope for cancer. We know a lot about cancer. We know more about cancer now than we did 5 years ago. Therapies are getting better currently, and Priscilla can attest to that. We have 2 German people here visiting. One is a scientist, he's a physicist and a biomedical specialist. We have 3 other doctors here, 2 from Spain and 1 from Colombia and South America. So Hope for Cancer is always on the leading edge of research all over the world, Asia, Europe, South America. And this is what it takes because, as I said earlier, patients are coming to us in advanced stages of cancer, and the results are quite impressive.
So if you could just recap that, the study shows that the traditional treatment at the 1 year or 2 year mark is at about 25 to 30% still alive. And what was your number again? I'd like to hear you just say it one more time.
Our numbers are 77% and above.
Okay. Are you aware of how many other treatment centers that are similar to yours are in business, globally speaking? Or if you don't know globally, what about North America?
You're talking about integrative alternative clinics, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I would not like to answer that question because I might sound like we're the best, which I believe we are. I've been doing this a long time, Jay, and I know what's happening in the world of integrative alternative medicine. And I do believe that at this time in 2019, we're blessed. We've had a lot of grace and we are the best treatment option for cancer. There are statistics. I would let them post it on their sites or talk about it.
Okay. We're coming up close to the hour that we've been live. We've got about 6 minutes or so, and I'd really like to respect your time so you could get back to doing what you do best. I do have two remaining questions that come to mind right now. One is, why do you think your numbers aren't, what's the difference between a patient that that makes it in that category of still being alive in a 70+% versus the other 22, 23% that aren't alive. And that may just be too wide of a question, but I am curious to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think your shirt says it all, Jay. Your shirt says choose hope. And I believe, and I've seen and I've experienced, even some patients that come to our treatment centers, they're coming here with doubt. They're coming here because maybe they were forced by some of their family members. They're coming here as a last option. They still have the prognosis that their oncologist told them, and they're not willing to make the lifestyle changes. I mean, there are some patients in our Tijuana clinic, which is an inpatient facility, that after 3 weeks when they leave, our cleaning staff is taking care of the room, and they find hidden Doritos, M&Ms, even tequila that they hide in their room, in the closet or the drawer. So that they're doing that at the treatment centers. Imagine when they get home, are they willing to make those lifestyle choices? And then they say, oh, the treatment wasn't successful, the treatment didn't work. So I believe still that at the foundation of healing and why some of the patients don't do well is the emotional, is the spiritual, because the body is designed to heal itself. The proverbial example of a cut, right? Someone gets a cut, we do nothing and the cut heals. The body is designed to heal once giving the tools and the therapies that it requires, but it starts with the emotional and spiritual. So we have to come into these therapies certain, beyond doubt, that yes, I have chosen hope, I could heal, and I need to do and make the necessary lifestyle changes.
Beautiful. That's amazing, Doc. I mean, we are so aligned, and you and I have never had a conversation other than through text, just to set up this show. But we are so aligned in how I'm living my life today and how I'm choosing to make the choices to be well and heal my mind, body, and soul. I also use music therapy every single morning. I take a spiritual hike. I relocated from Huntington Beach, California in September to help level my healing. And I hike 7 mornings every day. In the early morning, I go out with my music on. I hike, I sing, I pray, I meditate, and I do my spiritual work for healing.
Wow. And, that is awesome. I'd like to hear that again and repeat it to the patients, because I teach this all the time, right, Priscilla?
Right,
and,
absolutely.
Yeah. So,
well, maybe we could talk offline, but at some point, if there's some value for me to come in and share, although I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, thank God, I had 9 other diagnoses that I've been healing, and I'm down to the last one. As far as I'm concerned, I may be healed 100%, but it's an autoimmune that's got a little bit of stubbornness to it. And so we're working to hack it, to hack that one out.
You'll take care of it, no doubt.
Thank you. Last question. I know that your program, your treatment is you don't take insurance. It is an expensive program for some, but then again, when I say program, it's treatment. However, how can we afford to put a price tag on our own life? However, having said that, do you offer any type of scholarships for those that don't have the resources or think they don't have the resources? Do you offer any type of payment plans? Or is it you just have to get your cash together, and what are the choices?
Well, I'll answer that question in the best way possible, because about 8 years ago, I dissociated myself from the financial areas, right? So I focus on the medical, on the research, the therapies, the products, and so forth. But one comment I'd like to say from what you said is not that we don't take insurance, is that insurance doesn't take us. Because insurance companies, right, they're paying for conventional therapy. They're paying for one chemotherapy. One chemotherapy can cost $18,000, $20,000. One chemotherapy. And they're getting cycles and cycles of chemotherapy. These new immunotherapies, they're tens of thousands of dollars. So relatively speaking, right, we are far, far less expensive. However, it does come out of pocket, as you know, because insurance do not take us. That being said, we and I found out from my wife in our Christmas reunion with our patients, with our staff member last year, out of the generosity of Hope for Cancer, we funded a substantial amount of money for patients that couldn't afford and to come to the clinic. So that's one thing. So some patients do get scholarships. We can't do that much, obviously, because we are a private clinic with a lot of overhead and over 200 employees, as you said. But I believe that if someone wants to come to Hope for Cancer and they put it out there, they pray, it will happen. Because I could tell you story after story of how patients got here who didn't have a penny, didn't have a home to mortgage, didn't have anything. And it's interesting, Priscilla, you're shaking your head. Are you thinking about something?
Yeah, I have a practice, an alternative medicine practice myself, and my own patients raised half the funds for me within 2 weeks to come here,
Wow.
which was healing in itself, that outpouring of love and support. And I've run into other patients whose neighbors did GoFundMes or dinners and raised money. So, the support and love of those close to us is a huge piece of the healing.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Thank you
Well,
for
I hope I
sharing.
answered the question, Jay.
You both did. That was beautiful. It was kind of a setup question to an extent, because I did, in my research, I watched some YouTube videos of some of your patients that shared their stories of how they got the money together through GoFundMe pages, and I know some reached into their life insurance policies, and there's lots of creative ways to make it happen. At this point, what I'd like to do is ask both of you to just maybe take a moment just to share some closing words, as far as perhaps maybe there's someone that's listening that has just been diagnosed, or they know someone, maybe someone in our community has a friend or a loved one that's about to walk through the process of navigating through the disease and choices, or thinking they only have one, the traditional way. I'd first like to invite you, Priscilla, if you would mind sharing just some closing words for someone that may need to hear something you can say right now. Words of wisdom.
sure. I don't know how much wisdom I have, but I would definitely say examine your choices. Think consciously about what your options are, and don't accept that there's just one way, because there isn't just one way. Life has intelligence. We are life, and this program supports that principle with integrity, complete integrity, and effectiveness. So I can't say enough about the program, and I will be definitely promoting it to everyone that I know.
Priscilla or Doc, before you close out the show, what is your maximum capacity that you could, in each facility, that you could work with at any given time?
In the Tijuana treatment centers, we have a capacity of 30 patients, 21 inpatients at any one time, and 9 outpatients. In the Cancun facility, this is an outpatient clinic, and so we can see up to 50 patients a day.
Okay.
With respect to my closing remarks, Jay, if I can, I would like to read the last paragraph of my book, Hope for Cancer, the 7 Principles to Remove Fear and Empower Your Healing Journey. It's a couple paragraphs, and the subheading is, Be Encouraged. Be encouraged. There is much hope for your recovery when you follow the 7 key principles of cancer therapy that are outlined in this book, especially when you stay connected to God and simply believe. We have seen many healing miracles and full recoveries at our treatment centers, as well as cancers that have remained stable over many years. For even those patients that aren't healed, our non-toxic treatment approach has often allowed them to live fuller and more active lives for much longer than what they otherwise would have had. At Hope for Cancer, we believe that with God, all things are possible because we have seen and witnessed it time and time again. And it ends with, may you have the courage to believe that all things are possible for you too. As you seek God's face, take his hand and allow him to lead you on his perfect divine path of redemption, healing, and restoration. Peace, grace, and love to you in the name of Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Doc. I want to just take a moment to honor the two of you and thank both of you for the work that you do as integrative doctors. And the treatment that you offer to your patients is world-class. And I so appreciate that there are doctors available today that are doing a bit different than the typical run-of-the-mill. And I so much appreciate the work that you both do. I want to honor you and thank you both for taking time out of your days and out of your treatment, Priscilla, to step into the studio to hopefully someone hears something that they need to hear that gives them the courage to step forward and consider alternative treatments for cancer of any type. And with that, thank you for joining us on Real People, Real Health, and we'll catch you next time. If you guys can just stay in the studio, I'm going to take us off live and just for a moment here.